Last week I took a trip to Hyington. You might never have heard of Hyington, but there's a lot of people who think you should know it a lot better, because it has a pretty good claim to be the oldest railway station in the world. Now, I should say that that's a title with several asterisks next to it, so perhaps I should put it into a little historical context. Hyington is now on the Bishop line between Bishop Auckland and Darlington, but it was opened by the Stockton and Darlington Railway. The Stockton and Darlington first began service in 1825, and it was the first public railway to use steam locomotives. As such, 1825 has a good claim to be the dawn of the railway age. This is disputed among historians for the simple reason that there was no single moment of invention with the railways. Rather, it was a gradual evolution. You could put the date earlier, in 1804, when Richard Trevithick invented the steam locomotive. Or you could put it later, in 1830, when the Liverpool and Manchester Railway opened as the first main line railway. But I think it's fair to say that the Stockton and Darlington Railway was where the various technical innovations needed for the railway age started to come together. You may disagree on whether this constitutes the beginning, but there's a big year-long train party going on, and I'm certainly not going to spoil it. Here at Hyington, the first steam locomotive to operate on a public railway was assembled and hauled onto the rails. Number 1, now known as locomotion, but back then known as active. I sometimes wonder if there was ever a stationary engine named passive. Anyway, locomotion looked nothing like this. It looked more like this replica at Hopetown. 3 teenage boys assisted in getting it onto the track and were offered a ride, thus becoming the first recorded passengers to be hauled by steam on a public railway. Hyington Station did not exist in 1825. Rather, it was a goods depot. This wall here was once the upper part of a set of coal drops which allowed children wagons to be emptied into waiting carts. Passenger services in the early days were primitive, consisting of a coach hauled by a horse. The coaches were not much different from stage coaches. Passengers were picked up from wherever. They flagged the coach down and climbed aboard. But the operators of the railway noticed that in certain places you got more passengers than in other places. Hyington was one, and so this was chosen as the site of what we'd now call a station. It wasn't just the trains that were inspired by stagecoaches. A little way down the line was a coaching inn known as the Fighting Cocks, near to the railway. It's still there, by the way. Passengers waiting for a train would often do so in the inn, as they did for a stagecoach, meaning that the Fighting Cocks fulfilled some of the functions of a station. Indeed, the railway company would later build an actual station there, which is now closed, but that's another story. But I hope this also explains how the railway could operate with only one station, which is a question I get asked a lot. The answer was that the trains stopped at other places, those other places just weren't stations yet. It's no surprise that John Falcus Carpenter, the company architect, took inspiration from coaching inns when he designed the building. The building is sadly derelict at present, but this bit here was divided into waiting rooms. And this bit was an actual inn. So the Stockton and Darlington invented both the station and being drunk on a train. The innkeeper had to juggle serving food and drink with selling tickets, receiving parcels, and dealing with admin relating to the goods depot. In effect, he became the first station master. Actually, the building stopped being a pub in 1848, with the bar becoming station master's accommodation. The level crossing keeper was also allowed to issue tickets, but I couldn't tell you how that worked. This here is what remains of the world's first station platform. It was at ground level. As with coaches, it was simply accepted that you'd climb up. The platforms at Hyington are still very low, but not quite that bad. There was only one platform back in 1827 serving trains going both ways. The station was built in 1826 and opened in 1827 as Aycliffe Lane. In 1847 it was named Aycliffe and Hyington. In 1871, Aycliffe, and in 1874, Hyington. And so it remained. Aycliffe Lane would be followed in quick succession by a number of other stations on the line. In 1828, locomotion exploded here, killing its driver. The driver, John Cree, had tied the safety valve down to, as it were, overclock the boiler, and learned the hard way why it's called a safety valve. Locomotion was rebuilt a number of times to the extent that the current engine has basically nothing of the original, as I understand. That's partly because of rapid advances in steam technology, and partly because when it was restored for preservation in 1856, they just used whatever appropriately contemporary parts they could find to fix it up. But because it's looked like this for the longest time, that's the form in which it's usually depicted. There's a lot of philosophical questions raised by that engine. But anyway, Hyington, primitive though it was compared to what came later, has a strong claim to be the first station, in that it was the first to be purpose-built as such by the railway company. The Liverpool and Manchester Railway would refine many of the concepts pioneered by the Stockton and Darlington, which is why some historians prefer to argue that the Liverpool and Manchester built the first true stations. Certainly it didn't take long for the concept of the station to evolve into what we see today. The next station up the line, North Road, was built in 1842, and honestly, apart from the architectural style and materials, it's not so different from the kinds of stations we get today. Similar form, similar layout. You couldn't mistake it for anything other than a station. And that was built just 15 years after Hyington. Whether you consider Hyington to be the pioneer or not, there's no denying the importance of the station as a concept to the development of the railway. By introducing set stopping places, it was possible to timetable trains. Limiting the number of stops meant that trains could get up speed, giving them a marked advantage over stagecoaches. The railways went from just a fancy kind of road to a distinctive form of transport in their own right. Stations came to form a focal point for towns. In some cases, the town grew around the station. So what became of Hyington itself? Well, now it has two platforms, albeit very offset. The Stockton and Darlington Railway was bought out by the North Eastern Railway in 1863, and it was they who built the signal box in 1872. Hyington Signal Box is one of the oldest operational signal boxes in the country, so that's another claim to fame. There was a Royal Ordnance factory here, and as you might imagine, that made the station very useful during the Second World War. The platforms were extended and shelters were added. The shelters have since been removed, and trains are typically only 2 coaches these days, so that's sad. In 1970, the goods yard closed, and now that's the car park. And in 1982, the station building was sold off and once again converted into a pub. Unfortunately, history repeated itself and the pub went out of business again in 2017. Since then, it has lain derelict. Historic England and the Friends of the Stockton and Darlington Railway have looked into its history further, and have been campaigning to save it. By 2024, the building was on the Heritage at Risk register. But I have good news. In 2015, the station gained new neighbours in the form of Hitachi Rail Europe's new factory, and it is that company that donated the money necessary to save it. It was also they that hosted the event I attended to celebrate the saving of the station. Afterwards, we took a trip to Hopetown, Darlington, where some of the battery technology that Hitachi is developing was on display in the Steam to the Future exhibition. As regular viewers will know, I'm following the rapid improvements in battery technology for railways with some interest. Hitachi are working on battery units that can literally be swapped out with diesel engines and charged from overhead wires. It's all a bit technical for me, but I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. What's next for Hyington? The plan over the next few years is to restore it as close as possible to 1820s condition. And yes, that means it's going to be a pub again. I'm looking forward to it because that means the Bishop Line will have 3 important railway attractions in fairly close proximity: Hopetown Darlington, the Inn at Hyington, and the Locomotion Museum at Shildon. I mean, that's a pretty good day out, I think. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video, and if so, you may wish to leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I'm thinking I might do a video looking in more detail at North Road and Hopetown in the next few weeks, because frankly I've ended up at Hopetown 3 times this year and I am certain I have enough footage. And they've generally been really nice. I would like, as always, to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the station master's duties to my publican. I must also thank Hitachi, the Friends of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, and the staff of Hopetown Darlington for this event. I'd particularly like to thank Niall Hammond of the Friends, who answered all the questions I had. I also referred to the National Transport Trust's website and the book Shildon to Stockton by Roger R. Darsley and Dennis A. Lovett, which between them answered most of the questions I forgot to ask. Assume that any errors are mine. All that remains is for me to say that I hope to see you all again very soon. Cheerio.